Welcome to Why Not Both? This podcast is about the way that our multiple passions inform our identity. My name is Pam Shaffer, and I'm a musician, therapist, and tutor living in Los Angeles. Each week, I interview people about the ways that the multiple things they love inform who they are as people. You can learn more about this podcast as well as our guests on our website, which is wnbpodcast.com. You can also find us on social media, such as Instagram or Twitter, under the handle WNB The Podcast. Thank you so much for your support. It really helps us out when you like and subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform. So not only do you get the latest episodes, but other people can see us as well. Thank you again, and I really hope you enjoyed this week's interview. So welcome to this week's episode of Why Not Both? I am here with Nastya Valentine, and she is a multimedia artist and esthetician.
True, I am both of those things.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Pam.
So I always ask people, what is it you do, and is there a better question that I could ask?
Oh my gosh, I have such a love-hate relationship with that question because everyone always asks that basically in every social situation.
Yes.
I think for me, a more preferable question to that would be what are you doing now? Or what are you into now? Because to me, my art practice kind of revolves yearly. There's some years or some months that I'm more into doing music and music stuff. Some months that I'm more into set design. Other times that I'm just straight up filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
And there is also that split question, kind of how you introduced me as an artist and an esthetician, because I am an artist by practice and by, education, but I'm an esthetician as my day job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So two very distinct but still very interesting fields, in my opinion.
Yes, and I like that modification of what are you doing now?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that people do sometimes define themselves by what they did in the past, but then they might feel cognitive dissonance if they're like, but I'm not doing that right now.
Yeah, I feel that really hard, actually. Sometimes I'm very tempted to still define myself as a musician just because I have such a history with that.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm like, wait, I haven't actually even picked up a guitar or played a synth in over 6 months, so maybe ixnay on that for a while.
Yeah, and I like that you said that it's something that you practice.
Yeah. Practice makes perfect.
There you go. And also it sounds like practice is part of your identity. That kind of dovetails with a question that I had about how you define yourself.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it dovetails very nicely.
Yeah. Do you feel that what you're practicing is what defines you?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say how one defines oneself, but for me, generally, I look at what I'm putting in a lot of effort into and where I'm really, gauging where my energy is. So I guess you could say that I do define my practice as to where my effort goes.
Got it. So it sounds like for you then defining yourself by where your action and intention is going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very kinetic.
Yes. Yes. I find that I was talking to someone else about how it's so interesting that sometimes people are like, oh, I have this goal, but then they don't take the actions to get to the goal.
Oh my God, that's my worst nightmare. I'm so into goal setting, but if I have an ephemeral goal and I don't do anything for it, I just I cut the goal. I'm like, let's 86 that.
Yeah. You're like, if I haven't taken action towards it, that's probably, it's not the way. Yeah. I think that it's interesting that it's almost all these split-second choices of what we do that actually add up to what we are.
Mm-hmm. It's always adding and it's always building up. That's what's so interesting about the artistic identity to me is that it's so fluid and it's always changing.
Yes, right now you're working on several projects. You were like, oh, I just came back from filming in New York. Can you explain to people what you're working on now?
Sure. There's two major projects that I'm working on right now that aren't just the minor freelance, what have you. So the first one is a big event. So I curate events and I do the set design and production design for it and what have you. And they're in a series called Castles. So the first one was Party Castle a couple years ago, and it was a party mall theme. Then we had Space Castle, which was a spa on Mars. We had Nuclear Castle, which was Apocalypse. Cave Castle, which was the launch of a cave-themed magazine. And Bliss Castle was a utopia theme, the opposite of dystopia. So this next one, it's going to be called Clown Castle, and send in the clowns.
It's going to be terrifying.
It's going to be terrifying. Yeah, it's going to be like that scene in Fear and Loathing where Duke and Gonzo go into the circus kind of vibes. But yeah, it's going to be in New York, and it's going to be like a 3-day, like very like pompous extravaganza of like freaky but also kind of wholesome things. So definitely we'll pop in with more info on that later. And then I'm also making a film.
Yeah.
And this film is like my baby. It's called Zero Illumination, and it's hard to say like what it's about. It's kind of about like a scientist who goes rogue.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the best description that I've had for it so far.
Mm-hmm.
It's very like quasi autobiographical because I have a background in science as well. Like welcome to the many things that Nastya does. It kind of like aims to again like dovetail and like intertwine everything that I do under like one film project.
That makes sense.
And that's screening in New York in September.
Hey. Well, yeah, I was thinking about when you said that it was like a scientist that has gone rogue. I was like, because your other field actually is rather scientific, being an esthetician.
Sure. Yeah, when I went to esthetician school, I was almost like surprised at how scientific like all of the courses were. Like we dealt with like anatomy, electrical theory, for all of the equipment that we use. So my background in like audio and like video, like AV stuff served me well there. Of course, like biology and chemistry. So it was a lot, but it was cool.
Do you enjoy doing it?
I really enjoy doing it. I love doing like facials and microdermabrasion and peels. I love skincare in general. I think it's like, it's a huge part of life in general. Our skin is the largest organ. It protects us. We have to take care of it. We only have one.
Exactly, exactly. And I love that in a way, like, even though it does use a lot of technical expertise, like, you kind of lit up talking about it the same way as when you were talking about the castles. It's like you can, like, construct something.
I'm just, honestly, I'm very happy to finally have a day job that's separate from my art, that doesn't stress me out, but that's still, like, creative and challenging and engaging enough for me to come into work and be happy.
Right. I've talked to other people on the podcast and just in general about, like, that there's kind of a shame to having a day job.
Yeah,
and, like, there's a lot of conflicting advice out there about, like, the role of day jobs.
Right.
That some people say, like, oh, you should get a day job that's really boring so you'll be more encouraged to do your art. And then there's other people that are like, find a day job that's not fulfilling so you don't feel, obligated. But then there's the advice of, like, well, you don't want to just be an automaton and feel like you're wasting your time.
Absolutely not, yeah.
So,
I mean, I've seen, like, both ends of that spectrum. Like, I've had day jobs in, like, very corporate production, like, film, music stuff, which I thought were going to be fulfilling, that ended up just kind of draining my life and really making me almost incapable of producing my own creative work because I was working on somebody else's stuff with so much passion and fervor.
Got it.
And then I've also had, like, the restaurant barista, like, bartender kind of job where it was so far removed that it was like the antipodes of creativity, and it made it very difficult to like integrate.
Right.
So this is a nice happy medium that I'm dealing with right now. I hope it lasts. I'm like praying for like some continuity over here. Like, okay, let's make this happen.
Yeah, because I think that if you're overwhelmed by the creativity of your day job, then yeah, it seems like almost like you drain your reserves for later.
For sure.
But
at least for me.
That's how I felt too, where it's like if you have like too much investment, but if you're not invested at all, then I felt kind of like restless, I guess.
Yeah, like your mind goes to some weird places when you're bored. It might be like our Aquarius.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm Aquarius moon, but still.
Yes.
It's a vibe.
Yes. Or all of a sudden you're like, I'm in the ether somewhere, but it's also dark.
Yeah, like I'm thinking about solipsism and visual metaphors, but I'm folding clothes or I'm pouring drinks. This does not make sense.
Yes, you're like, I've gone elsewhere into the world of psychomagic, but like, did you want sugar with it?
Cognitive dissonance.
And I feel like in some ways, like, one of the questions that I do ask people is like, do you think that we're defined, because we do live in a capitalistic society, like, are we defined by what makes us money?
I ponder about that all the time, and I mean, my instinct, like as like a renegade, is just to say no, like fuck it, fuck money, it's not real. But at the same time, we need to survive, we need to
Mm-hmm.
eat, we need to buy Dior clothes, we need to dye our hair, we need to buy
Yes.
beautiful heels and thigh highs and nail polish. So I would
Exactly.
say I'm an equal part like communist, anarchist, materialist, but not a capitalist. I don't know how I would define myself, in that systemic situation.
I love that. I love that because, like, I guess for me, like, what you said just definitely, like, pinged a bunch of thoughts in my brain
Yeah.
about, like, that for me, like, money is a vehicle to just express who I am and to help other people
Yeah,
express
what
who
the
they are.
fuck is money? It's mush. It's paper that you
Yeah.
trade with people.
Yeah.
What?
And so it's like, it's really strange. So I'm like, okay, so like when we talk about like day jobs, those are things that like are monetized.
Mm-hmm.
And
100%.
yeah, and it's so interesting to me, like what is considered, quote, valuable in money terms, but then
Mm-hmm.
we can translate that money into other value. Like you said, like you can get awesome thigh highs.
Yeah,
And
value
like,
can be anything.
yeah.
Anything can be anything.
Like end of podcast right there.
Scene.
Just be like, that's it. That's all you get.
Yeah, I mean, it would be pretty tight to have like a bartering system.
Yeah, because
But
that's
would that be sustainable? I don't know. In college, it was. I mean, I went to Bard, so that should tell you a lot about me. The bartering system.
barter. I see what you did there.
Yeah.
That was a good dad joke.
I hope my dad is listening to this right now.
Right, right. And I think about like, what about the, something like a universal income? Because I think that some people criticize universal income because they're like, then people wouldn't be
They wouldn't
motivated to do more. Right. And it's like, in some ways, I'm like, okay, I can see how for people of a certain temperament, they wouldn't want to strive beyond that. But then what's to say that it wouldn't then encourage people who are like oppressed by the current system, that they wouldn't then just skyrocket and kind of make up the
Right.
difference?
It's kind of like, I mean, there are so many different types of pay structures right now, and like that you can do like hourly, you can do salary, commission, there's like commission plus. So why not add another thing with universal income? I think that like our government is just very afraid of getting experimental and like adding new things.
Yes.
Like
yes.
even like the film industry like is so resistant to change.
Yes.
Like there aren't any like very like avant-garde like movies coming out like big ones. It's all just like recycled, like regurgitated like Spider-Mans and Avengers and shit.
Right, and it's the same
Remakes
it's
and
the same basic stories over and over. And like
Right.
in some ways I'm like, okay, well I guess like humans do need stories that we tell each other over and over.
We need stories.
But at a certain point, like, how many times can you tell the same story?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, no, I saw that one. Like, that's what's interesting to me about like the art that you do, is that some of the tropes like feel familiar, but they're not so familiar that I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen that before.
That's a really great compliment. I'm gonna think about that for a long time. I think one time you called like one of my movies Vaporwave Lynch, and that really stuck with me because I'm like, wait, I'm very influenced by both of those things.
Yes.
I love just bringing shit together that has like zero connection with each other, like Vaporwave and Lynch.
And Lynch. Yeah, and they feel very natural. Like, I feel like the overlap of those two things in your art, I was like, oh yeah, I can parse both of those things out, but they made something entirely new.
Tight. I like that.
That's why whenever you're like, would you like to be part of my art? I'm like, yes.
Yes, please be part of my art all the time.
Like, just drench me in hologram things.
Perfect. That's always my go-to, is like glittery, sparkly. Everything that I didn't get to do in the corporate world, like all like the fun stuff, like the fake blood and like the guts and the green screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
What were you doing like in the corporate world? Were you doing more set design or more?
Yeah, I was interning. Well, first I started as an intern for like Spin Media when they were Spin Magazine, and I was doing video production. So I started working on their like green screen and teleprompter and just like with the gear. And I was fixing their gear too, which was weird. And then I got into more like set design. When I moved back to LA after graduating college, I considered like doing one of two paths. I had just finished like a film that I had like live scored and like made the soundtrack for. And my advisor told me that, oh, maybe you should like kind of take it on tour.
Oh.
And I thought like, oh, cool idea. But then I got offered like a job at Warner Brothers. So I'm like, maybe I should just take like the interning job, because it was like audio
Oh.
mixing for film, like assisting like an audio mixer.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty tight.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I actually ended up really hating it. It was very sexist. It was like all 40-year-old men and me, and I was very underpaid,
God.
and I wasn't even really doing that much like actual sound work. It was very like, okay, I'm just sitting there like I feel like I'm a receptionist. Like
That
a glorified
sucks because you're
receptionist.
so capable that I'm like,
Right. Yeah, so I kind of bounced around like gigs like that. I should have probably done the like going on tour immediately after college, but I did that afterwards with like some like DIY bands, and I guess
oh.
for lack of a better word, like there's a time and place for everything, and it all has like served to teach me a lesson.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that the way you're describing it, like that sounds like an issue with the system. Like when people say like, oh, why aren't there more women in sound engineering? If that's what you encountered as like fresh out of college sound engineer, ready to do the work.
Yeah. I mean, if it was like intern needed or PA needed, that's different than like sound engineer needed.
Yeah, that's
like
that's a specialized skill. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also like when you say specialized skill, that's something that always sets off alarms in my brain, because I'm like, oh my God, what do I specialize in? What the fuck? Am I a sound engineer? Do I fix cars? Like, what do I do? I probably should.
I love it. You're like, what do I do?
But
That's
I
so
think
funny.
once I started becoming an esthetician, that's really taught me a lot about like specializing. That's a specialization in day job. And I feel like now that I have the comfort of that, I can just kind of do whatever with my art because I'm the boss of it.
I love it. Do you feel, what's your specialty as an esthetician?
I really, really consider myself like not an expert, but someone who's like really been through like hormonal breakouts and like hormonal acne.
Oh.
Like if you saw what my face looked like maybe like a year or two ago, it was like cystic motherfuckers.
Oh, and those are so painful.
And so painful. And it only started when I was like 25 or 26. So it took me like a year of very dedicated skincare to get it under control. And I've been noticing that a lot of my clients who are like late 20s, early 30s have been dealing with that. My gynecologist has this whack theory that it kind of makes sense, but it's also kind of whack that women nowadays are having kids later or not having kids at all. That, back in the day, like we'd pop out kids at like 20, 25 or something. Right. And now we don't have those same like hormonal wave patterns. So because we haven't had those like pregnancy hormones or what have you, like it shows on our skin, our hair, and blah, blah, blah.
Well, and also we have so
conspiracy.
many. I was gonna say we also have a lot of hormones in our food and
The
things
air.
like and so I think that there might be. I immediately was like, I feel like that meme of the guy with the red strings.
I know. Hormones everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Hormones.
Right.
But I think that there must be some sort of veracity to that people are experiencing different cycles because I did talk to my doctor about that, and I have other friends who have talked to their doctors about the exact same thing, about like experiencing hormonal acne that before it was seen as like, oh, just a teenager thing.
I never had acne as a teenager.
Yeah.
I was one of those like hateable people with like perfect skin up until I was like 26.
And then you're like, what happened?
What happened?
Yeah. And I think that that's something that's really important to deal with, because especially
you got to go through it.
Yes. And like I feel like people denigrate those who deal in appearances, but our face is the first thing people see.
It's our business card.
Yes. And so as much as we want to say that, oh, appearance doesn't matter and things like that, it's not that you have to adhere to a certain standard of beauty, but you want to feel comfortable in your face.
Totally. That's exactly right. You want to feel comfortable. You want to look at yourself and be like, oh, this is me. I think like one of my favorite epiphanies that I ever had, like the first time that I took acid, was when I had a lot of like body image issues and like eating disorder stuff when I was a kid. But I looked at myself in the mirror and I was just like, this is neither ugly nor beautiful. It's just me. And I love it. And I think that was like a very like telling point in my life.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
Yeah, I love telling that story. I'm like,
And that's, yeah, I mean, that seems to almost go back to like when we were talking about like self-definition of just like acceptance and noticing. Like, I liked that you said that if you had a goal that you weren't putting effort towards, that you let it go.
Let it go, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I feel like that's part of self-acceptance is like accepting what is part of you and then being able to be like, if something's not part of you, that's okay.
Right. I think like on a broader scale, like almost like with people as well. Like if someone isn't like showing like reciprocity.
Yes. Like to reference a previous conversation.
Power move.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that that's like...
I love breaking the fourth wall.
That's amazing. Yeah, like thinking about kind of like if you are going to be a person who does multiple things, you have to really identify what your passion is and are people on that level.
It's true. I mean, it's harsh, but it's life. It's
Yes.
It's Nastya's world. You're just living it.
I'm okay with living in it. Yeah, because I think, like, when you were talking about the way that you treat your art and you treat being an esthetician, like, I hear, like, kind of a common thread of, like, passion and engagement with it.
Well, almost like a reverence. Like, I mean, this sounds really cheesy, but I consider art to be very sacred. And it's, like, even, like, the performance and the ritual of it, even if it's just, like, a green screen and you're making a piece about, like, doing drugs or something, there's still so much that goes into creating a film or creating a piece of art. And you don't need to know how the secret sauce is made.
Right.
Because I know how the secret sauce is made.
Well, and I think, like, some of it has to do with intention. Like, and I don't think that, for instance, like you said, like, oh, well, it might be, like, a green screen and, like, someone's, like, doing drugs. But I think even with, like, doing drugs, it depends on what your intention is behind doing drugs.
Agreed. Yeah, it always trips me out how some people can just, like, take shrooms or acid and go to a party. Like, that's...
Right?
I cannot do that. It has to be like a sacred, like planned out kind of like intention heavy day for me of like, I don't know, like, is there going to be ego death? Like, is my intention to just like have an aesthetic experience?
Right.
I don't want to, I mean, I love like Gaspar Noé stuff and like Enter the Void or any, and all of that, but I can't see that as a practice.
Well, and I was talking to a clinic actually in LA that offers ketamine treatments.
Love it.
And yeah, that was the thing is like, I think that almost any substance can be used beneficially if used with intent.
100%.
And like talking to them about how they do the infusions and like what they guide the client through and things like that. I think that as long as we treat things with respect and with intent, as opposed to like if you're taking something to just blot something out,
right?
It's the same as like any other compulsive behavior where you like either overeat or compulsively like use attention from other people or like whatever your thing is. It's
self-sabotage.
Like, yeah. And there's a huge difference between like actually engaging with something with intent, not even to necessarily better yourself. Like I'm not really attached to like better or worse.
Right.
But just like approaching it with like, okay, I'm going to respect this journey.
Well, there's like a whole spectrum of like, you know, you can use psychedelics as like the way like MAPS does it for consciousness raising, or you could use it as the way that MK Ultra did it for torture. Yes. So there's no such thing as a good or bad drug. It's just the way that it's used.
Yeah, like I thought it was so interesting. I started reading, and I need to read more of it. Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. I think
I've heard of that. I've never read it.
I was supposed to go on a hike with a friend, and he had it by one of the chairs in his house, and like I sat down because he was like getting his stuff ready for the hike, and I just started reading it, and he's like, "Are you ready to go?" And I was like, "No, I just want to sit here and read your book." Right
like, is that what you're reading right now?
Okay, I have this thing where I have to finish at least one of the books I'm reading before I buy a new one.
Cool. I wish I could do that.
I just wrapped one of them, but then I accidentally hopped into another, so I'm like, oh, Schaefer, you messed up. Ooh, you gotta...
See, that's my problem with books. I used to be such an avid reader, like in high school, like reading was definitely like one of my favorite like activities. Now I'll start a book, get into like a chapter, and like, then I'll reread another book, then like I'll go through like one chapter that I really like in it, and like, oh, okay, I'm inspired now, like bye.
Yeah, you're like,
buy another book. I'm like, next.
That's,
oh my god.
Yeah.
But have you heard of Luigi Serafini's book? It's like the Codex Seraphinianus.
No.
Oh my
what?
god. Okay, I'm gonna like either like text you a link to it. It's one of my friends in college had this book. It's huge. It's basically like a surrealistic encyclopedia of like another world, but the creator like makes a whole like different language. It's just like a whole, it's really hard to explain because it's really psychedelic, but it's like a whole system of living that's like something that you can imagine from another planet. Like if you land on fucking Mars or something and you pick up this book, this is what it would seem like from a very like authentically like Martian perspective.
That's fascinating.
It's very cool.
That's like, for whatever reason, I've always been, it's funny that you brought up like when people do like shrooms and psychedelics at parties. I'm the person that they always somehow come and find.
Oh my god, me too. I always, yeah, it's like, I'm on Molly right now. Like, oh my god.
Yes, and I'm just like, I don't know what it is about us that like people are just like, you shall be my spirit guide.
Yeah,
and I was like,
sure.
I was just, okay, well, I guess this is what I'm doing now.
This is it. Babysitter. Yes. It's like a psychedelic babysitter.
Every time. And I'm just like, I want
to put that on your resume.
Psychedelic babysitter. Therapist, musician, psychedelic babysitter.
It's got a ring to it. I'd hire you.
I'm apparently really good at it.
I believe that. Please babysit my next trip.
Exactly. Be like,
voyage.
I'll sign up. Yeah, because it sounds like, talking about psychedelics, it makes me think about, like, it seems like that's brought a lot into your life. And, like, I was curious what
it really has.
Yeah, I was like, what's the dovetailing with that? And then with so much of, like, the filmmaking and the visuals and the events, like, do you feel like you've been able to bring some of the lessons from psychedelics to those or vice versa?
You know what? I think yes. I mean, I've always had synesthesia. It's like like a condition where like your senses cross and you can experience like sound as color and vice versa. I think that's what really like marries me to art. But when I started doing psychedelics, it really like unlocked it for me in a way that I was able to kind of put like a definition on it. I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy. This is what my perception is like. And it's sometimes it's really annoying, but most of the time it's pretty cool. And I think on a broader scale, it also makes sense as to why like I cross all of these disciplines like film and music or like graphic design and curation or like science and beauty or like what have you. I think it's cool to like blend everything together. I just think that like everything is trippy and everything is psychedelic.
Yes. What does it feel like to share that with other people? Because I think part of art, like part of it's the making of it and then part of it's the like, then it's out in the world.
Right. I'm always surprised if like people come up to me and they like know something about my art. I'm like, oh my god, you know like this character from this movie that I made or like some like obscure fact. I'm just genuinely surprised by it, but then I think it's cool. Sharing it with people, I'm always a little bit afraid that people aren't gonna like get it or like kind of be turned off by how weird it is. But at the same time, like life's too short, fuck it. Whatever, let people be weird. You only get one.
You only get one go. Yeah, and it's like I was talking to, it wasn't a podcast guest, but I was talking to someone else about like art and music as communication and like there's a difference between if you're making art that just like satisfies something in you versus if then you want to put it out in the world and share it with someone else, then it becomes a back and forth.
Right. But also like why I want to make more like long form films is because I really like everyone in LA works in film, but I don't know that many people who actually make films. So I want to kind of fill in that blank of like making really weird like Ryan Tricartany kind of stuff. There's a lot of people who, you know, have like blogs and like have like YouTube videos and such, which is cool. Like I envy that ability to make like short form content consistently. I think that's like a huge skill. But I kind of want to bridge the gap between like very like DIY work and like films and cinema, like long, big content.
Long form cinema. Where do you find that most people see your work?
Probably like online.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Darkness, the last film that I made, is on Amazon now. I think that's pretty much where most people have seen it.
Yeah, because I was thinking about like how audiences, what was I going to say? It's like how audiences access media.
Right. That's always something that I think about too, because when it comes to like releasing my own work, like films especially, like where to find a screening space. It's tough with films because people prefer to watch from the privacy of their own home and like their laptop and iPhone rather than go to like a party or a screening and watch something in silence for like an hour. Right. I love that. I wish there were more things like that and like more like DIY filmmakers. So if you know any.
Well, it seems like that might be the next castle.
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, for Clown Castle, I've like hit up a lot of my New York friends who make like short films and stuff. So there's
Mm-hmm.
definitely going to be a screening component to it. And
Yeah.
also for like anyone listening, if they want to like contribute some clown stuff.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
We'll include links so
Oh
that
yeah,
people can actually
this is gonna be
find you.
fire under my ass to like recode my website.
I know
It'll
that
look good,
feeling.
though.
I know that feeling where I'm like, oh, I need to. Oh, people are actually gonna see this.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll make it look pretty.
How do people find you for esthetician stuff, or do you practice under like other clinics or?
I work at Heyday.
Mm-hmm.
So Heyday, it's like very like it's a contemporary salon, and we do facials based on time. We don't have a menu. We do like 30-minute, 50-minute, or 75-minute facials
Mm-hmm.
and skincare treatments. And I really like the concept of it because we just look at the person's skin and do like a very thorough analysis and say like, okay, maybe you want like a more chill facial today. You just want to like relax, or maybe you really, really want to like drill down on those comedones, or maybe you want to exfoliate more today, or maybe you want to focus on like a facial massage and get that like tightened a little bit. So I like having the ability to kind of like tailor it to whatever the client wants. It's definitely a service job, but it's cool.
That's so cool. Do you feel like that's like it feels like that fulfills like a different part of you?
It does. It fulfills the part of me that's like the nurse archetype. You know what I mean? It's like I want to make people happy and like feel good about themselves.
That's interesting.
It's my like I mean, I feel like my art does contribute to the world, but not like in a more aesthetic way, but my esthetician practice contributes to the world and like making people feel good and actually doing something good.
Well, and it's so tangible because you can see the exchange
You can see
right
the results.
there.
You can see people feeling happy and relaxed, and that's always really nice.
Oh, that's how I feel about like with my therapy practice too.
Yeah.
There's sometimes people come out of practice and they're like, "Oh my god, that was like a mental workout."
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
And I'm like, yeah, I was just like, I'm sure that there are therapists that just are there to like make you feel really good, but I'm like, no, we're gonna go to the dark, truthy place.
Let's do it.
Like,
Oh my god, have you heard of like birth therapy? Or like rebirth?
oh yes,
Whether you
I have heard of
experience
that.
your own birth or something?
Yes.
That sounds fucking terrifying.
Yes, I'm just like, I mean, did your mom ever tell you the story of your birth, or?
I mean, no, but like I've had like ayahuasca experiences that were like death and rebirth, and I'm like, I don't think I ever wanted to experience. I mean, death was like not as unpleasant as rebirth, I feel like.
Interesting.
For at least like in my experience of it, I'm like, holy shit, like when you're born, you go, I don't know, you just go through so much trauma.
I was literally reading about birth as trauma.
That's
bizarre.
That's crazy. Also, like when you're like an infant, infants don't remember anything, and isn't there like some theory? Is that because it's so traumatic that the brain, though it hasn't formed yet, just blocks it out immediately?
Well, and also a lot of memories are pre-verbal because memories get coded in different ways. Like they'll get coded verbally, they get coded somatically, they get coded sensorially. So that's why, for instance, like our earliest memories are olfactory because that's our first sense that's fully developed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Neuroscience is amazing.
Right? That's why like even our visual memories, I mean, we don't really track well with our eyes until about 2 or 3 months.
Ooh.
And we do hear things, but they don't have attachments to things because also we don't have object permanence
Right. No
until a
object
bit later.
permanence.
And so that's why some of our visual memories or our auditory memories aren't attached to that much because we don't attach them to objects. But olfactory memories are the very first ones that we have.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so like we do store memories and we do store emotional memories, but we don't necessarily have recall for them. So they might be traumatic, but they also might be great, but we don't have like the words to recall them.
Got it. Do you have any like crazy like smell memories?
There are like certain smells that like
take you back?
yeah. Like even, I mean, there's some that are very conscious. Like for instance, the smell of any lip balm from the Body Shop.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Immediately, I'm like, yes. The smell of like certain bagels.
Ooh.
Right?
Bagel smell is nice.
Bagel smells
like,
really
it's
nice.
very visceral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bagel smells really good. The smell of, I think it's called Shalimar, like the perfume.
Like the grandma perfume?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's certain like, or like there's the smell of like certain kinds of wood that smell like wood paneling from
That's so
my
interesting.
childhood. Yeah, it's like there's these weird little blips
That's like fragrance as art and like scent as like conspiracy. Like, like Abercrombie and Fitch, like that's how they get people to come in by with smell. And like Sephora has like fragrance that entices people in.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Well, and I think about like, have you ever walked into like a restaurant like that smells somehow familiar even though you've never been there before?
Honestly, like my sense of smell is really bad. I would say that it's probably my worst of all of my senses. But I have this one wallet, and it's like a SpongeBob wallet. And I think I've had this since 5th grade or something. And then I open it up, and it smells like the beach, but like strawberries, but like perfume, but like sand. It has this really interesting like very strong scent combination that I can't really quite describe, but it reminds me of something primordial. And it hasn't lost its scent. Like I keep it in like a little memory box, and every once in a while if I like go through it, I'm like, is it still there? Oh fuck, it's still there.
Yeah.
It's crazy. That's my one like crazy scent experience.
That's so interesting because like when you were a kid, did you move around a lot? Did you stay in the same place?
We moved around a lot. My dad is like, he's from France and my mom is from Russia. Like my parents met in Russia. We moved around a lot, and then we moved to America when I was like 2.
Oh, gotcha.
And then even when we were in California, we moved like I think until like my teenage years, I moved around a lot.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, because that can definitely, I feel like growing up in LA and then living here, there are certain like scent memories that are associated even with seasons. Like there are certain smells in the air
like
that I'll get.
You know what? I get that. Like winter in particular for me. Yeah, it's kind of like, it reminds me of like red and blue. Yeah.
Yeah, and like certain smells you can smell and understand like what the air quality looks like and what the light diffusion looks like, and like
amazing.
Yeah.
Also, sometimes like when I think of seasons in LA and like lack thereof, it kind of almost makes me like apocalyptically sad, because what if there just aren't going to be any seasons in the future? It's very possible to have a seasonless world.
It would be either seasonless, or it seems like there will be places that will be very extremely seasoned.
Yeah.
Too spicy.
I don't know. Too spicy. I don't want to touch that one with a 10-foot pole.
I'm just like, and then there will be places where you're like, that needs a little more mayo.
Yeah. I also like, I've noticed that a lot of artists are making art about the environment, like Bjork, and even like smaller artists as well. That's something that I want to check out.
I was gonna say, like, I found that, and more artists are speaking up explicitly about the environment as well. There's an interview that popped up with Aurora that I was listening to, and her latest album actually does connect to kind of like our connection to the world and like being an alien in the world, but also being of the world. And she was talking about how like essentially we are on a changing planet, and I think that that's going to be a thread that we see in art a lot because it's unavoidable.
Right. Yeah, I put in like a scene for my new film, like in Zero Illumination. Like there's like one scene that delves into how fucked up the environment is going to be in the future. But again, from my very fatalistic perspective, I feel like, I don't know, I just think that it's going to be doomed. I don't think there's much that we can do to control it. I mean, we can all like go vegan and start recycling, but it needs to be like a full team effort.
I was going to say we need like everyone on team.
It has to be like in Minnesota and like Michigan, like Iowa, like Alaska, everywhere.
I was going to say like China,
Russia, like Middle East, like everywhere.
Well, and I think that it feels like we're on the cusp of like the end of an epic. And
it
like,
does, yeah.
It's very weird, and it's interesting talking to another artist during this time because I think about that a lot. Like when I'm writing about like, in a way, it's sort of like everything seems a little frivolous, but also like I want to lean into the frivolity because it's all we have right now.
It's both very frivolous and very heightened, and it's like a very difficult situation to reconcile.
Yeah, because it's like we can see that we're at the end of an empire. Like that's pretty clear.
Very clear.
But like,
but what's next?
Yeah, and it's like, I sometimes, I would wonder like, oh, what was it like at the cusp of the Renaissance, or what was it like after the fall of Rome, or what, and like, I would wonder hypothetically like, what would it be like in those eras? But I didn't really want to be jettisoned into one of those eras.
For real.
It was more of an abstract, and now I'm like, I didn't really want that to be concrete, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, there's only one way to go, and that's through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we're all doing that now, together, but separate.
Separate and yet together. Yeah. Because I feel like in a way, like hearing about like the themes in your art and hearing about in the way that you like to tangibly help people like it does almost feel like you're like preparing yourself and other people for putting their best foot forward in that journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been reading a lot about like the Tibetan Book of the Dead and Tim Leary's The Psychedelic Experience. Basically, every time I think like my life is going south, I reread that and I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't the only dimension. Whatever. This is all just gameplay. But fun gameplay, you have to lean into it.
I think that's what I was thinking about, like leaning into the frivolity of it, of like your other option is to just kind of give up and just sit.
Right, but that sucks.
Yeah.
That's the easy way out.
And it's like the avoidance, or like when we were talking about kind of like the wrong way to use drugs, I guess, of like kind of the dipping out as
Like
opposed
numbing.
to yes, where it's like you can either kind of like peace out or you can lean into your passions.
Word.
I'm just like, because it sounds like in a way, like your films have brought you a greater understanding of like yourself, but like what else has like engaging in music and engaging in film and engaging in visuals? Like, what do you feel like that's brought to you?
That's a really good question. That's also, well, one of the main things that it's brought to me is my capacity to collaborate with other people.
Ooh.
Because prior to that, like, prior to when I started like making films and music in college, I was like, I'm very like shy and reserved. Like, okay, for astrology people, I'm a Scorpio sun, Aquarius moon, and Leo rising. I feel like it's like a lot going on there.
You're a very secretive show off. I love it.
Yeah, true. Like the Scorpio in me, like just wants to be unbothered, like in my room with the door closed, like listening to Animal Collective, just like everybody fuck off. But then the Aquarius and Leo are like, no, we want to hang out with people.
We want to hang out. Look at all the like future vision, and look at how great these shoes are.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's like as a director, and that it's been like also mostly like as a casting agent, I guess, because I've cast all of my friends, but I think their roles just fit perfectly into what I kind of envision as like the characters that I write. Yeah. There have been also like some instances where, you know, when choosing like between people to cast for a certain role, and like if somebody's schedule aligns with my filming schedule, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna rewrite this part to particularly tailor that person.
To like match the person.
Yeah. And I'm all about the like improvisational quality of it as well, just to see what they bring to it as people, because I'm the boss of the project, but they're the boss of their part. So I don't want to direct them too much.
That's one thing I liked about shooting with you, both for like the images that you took from my music, but also like shooting within your film.
Cool.
Is that like,
I'm glad.
Yeah, it's like you're directive, and I can tell that you have like kind of an overarching goal in mind, but you're not super attached to like exactly how.
Totally.
And I like that a lot, because it opens up space for like trying things, because then you're like, well, some of this is going to work, some of this isn't going to work, but we don't know until we actually do it.
Exactly.
And so it's like having that like kind of, it's a big container, but it is a container.
Yeah, I'm definitely much more of like a big picture person than a detail oriented person. And I also like that like working on like DIY, more like lo-fi projects, it gives you a lot of space to fuck it up.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can make the mistakes, but then you can like rectify them and learn from them. I think that's also what filmmaking has brought to me, is that it's allowed me to kind of fuck shit up.
You're just like, I'm not attached to this. Like the worst that could happen is that it doesn't work the way I thought it would.
Exactly. It's like I don't always have to be right. I want to, but it's not always gonna happen.
And that's an important lesson just in general, especially like, you know, because I think that harkened back in my brain to like the idea of practice, like putting this into action.
Oh, yeah, big metaphor alert.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like there should be like a little visual symbol. People can't see, but I'm doing like little like jazz hands.
Jazz hands.
Metaphor alert. Like when you're like enacting your identity, it's kind of like, oh, well, what's showing up and what's working and what's not working.
Exactly. It's all a practice. Like even like existence is an art medium too. I consider it an art medium. I never like take time off from it. It's weird. Like people ask me like, when do you take a vacation from art?
Right.
And that's another hard question for me too, because even if I like, let's say like take like 3 months off from a year from doing any projects, I'm still going to be thinking about something like overarching. I'll be taking notes for myself or working on something private.
And that's, I wrote down in my journal kind of like, I guess like, I don't know what to call them, but I wrote a list of 20 things that I can do to like recharge.
I love that.
Yeah, because
so
it's like,
important.
because it's weird, because I think much the same, I don't really like to do things for, I guess, what people conventionally would call leisure. because I find a lot of my leisure through creativity.
Cool. Yeah, same.
And so I'm like, I don't really feel the need to, I guess, like take traditional like time off.
I do play a lot of video games though.
There you
That's
go.
my leisure.
My leisure, I guess, is like I love going on hikes or long walks.
Awesome.
To like kind of just embody myself again because I
and
find
being in nature.
Yes. Like, and even if like, because sometimes at the end of a hike, I'll like all of a sudden, boom, like a song will come to mind, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes all that comes to my mind is like how nice trees are.
And that's okay.
And that's great.
Cool.
Like,
yeah,
sometimes
I love that.
like I'm like, oh, I needed to do that. And like some of it's like physical, some of it is like treating myself to a good meal, some of it is like even having a conversation.
I'm
with
gonna buy
a friend.
myself some bougie sushi after
Oh
this.
my god, bougie sushi. By the way, there's like a code for Postmates that popped up on like my little notification today. I was just like, oh, you got me. Yeah. Totally gonna Postmates myself.
I'm gonna treat myself to some sushi and wine.
I love it.
That's what I'm gonna do. I think I would give that advice to everyone. Just do it.
Yes, I think I love
buy yourself meals and stuff.
Yes, like I kind of on that list, like I'll pick something from it every day, even if it's something really small, because some of it is like take a nap, like look at Pinterest, because I like to look at like different visual things, because much like you, I have mild synesthesia, and so like I'll start hearing different things while I'm looking at different colors and aesthetics.
So cool.
And so like that will spark things. And Pinterest is less charged than Instagram, because like Instagram sometimes it gets attached to like the person posting.
Instagram, I need to take days off from it every once in a while because it gets too much.
It's too much. And so like that's why like I used to flip through magazines, but now magazines are also really charged, and so I'm just like, ugh.
Pinterest is cool.
I like Pinterest a lot. Like it can send you down really fun aesthetic rabbit holes, and like I kind of follow the advice of Agent Cooper of giving yourself a gift every day.
I was literally just thinking about that. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna wait for her to finish talking.
Like,
and then
are we gonna get to the
Agent
in on
Cooper? We're going into the Black Lodge.
Yes,
that's a show that I can always rewatch recreationally. Like,
yep.
I find that every time I watch it, there's some part of it that I've missed.
Thank you.
Like a new like.
Yes, it is one of my great joys to rewatch Twin Peaks and to share it with new people.
Yeah.
Because then watching them watch it, I see new things too.
I don't trust people who don't like Twin Peaks.
Me neither. Twin Peaks and Bjork are my litmus tests.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's like
and Animal Collective.
Yeah.
But I get how people don't like them either.
Well, and also it's like for me, I guess I feel like if you can at least get down with it and recognize it, even if it's not
your cup of tea,
your thing.
Yeah.
If you can't recognize those things for what they are, then I'm just kind of like, I don't know.
Agreed. Couldn't agree more.
I'm so glad that we discovered the Agent Cooper moment.
Yes. Oh, every moment is an Agent Cooper moment.
Oh, if only.
He's my dream man.
He is.
Why doesn't he just exist? He should just. Okay, I'm manifesting him into the universe.
There we go.
Let's do it.
There we go. And only the one Cooper. We don't need any of the tulpas.
Oh,
I mean, they were
no
interesting,
tulpas.
but like...
I don't need Mr. C. I need like 1991 Dale Cooper.
That was like... That's the vintage of Dale Cooper I'm into.
It's incredible how, this like FBI guy who could have been portrayed as very straight-laced is into like Tibetan Book of the Dead and all these like Zen interesting phenomena. And just the way he talks is so spellbinding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Like, it's interesting because I was going to ask about like kind of the dovetailing of your professions, but I feel like almost like you're embodying like the female Agent Cooper.
That is the greatest compliment I have. Oh my God. I feel so blessed. Agent Cooper was like one of my biggest inspirations for my character in Darkness, because she's an FBI. She gets murdered by one of her lovers, and then she comes back from the dead as an FBI spirit, and I'm like, I'm Agent Cooper. I'm Agent Cooper. And I'm gonna murder this motherfucker who fucked me up.
Yes,
so
and
it's
I
like
love
Agent Cooper and Kill Bill.
And I remember that scene where you like come back and and you can see it in your eyes that you're like, I'm back. like this shit is going down.
And she's blissed off.
Like, oh my God, that makes me so happy. This like explains why we're friends.
True. it's a great bonding tool.
Like, oh my God. So if someone wanted to start on their path of being Agent Cooper and of like getting into film and of getting into this kind of stuff, what would you recommend someone do?
I mean, this is so cheesy, but just start doing it. If somebody is already like, inspired by a lot of films and has a certain like idea that they want to execute, it doesn't matter if it's like lo-fi and like really bad and really badly shot, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because chances are, like, if you're young, you're gonna keep improving with time.
Right.
Like, I've also like, my research has shown that a lot of filmmakers have started like in their 30s and 40s. Like,
yes.
David Lynch, like Tarantino, they didn't make their first films until like their like late 30s.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, I've got 10 years to get as good as
there you go.
them.
Well, and I think also like there's a lot of pressure in the arts, and I find especially on female artists that somehow you have to come out as like, I mean, not to diss Billie Eilish. I love Billie Eilish.
Yeah.
Passionately. I feel very protective of her weirdly. But like you don't have
She's
to.
so young. She's
That's,
a baby.
yeah, she's like 16, 17, and it's like.
Wait, really? I thought she was like 20, but that's, wow.
No, she's like actually a baby. Like,
Wow.
is actually a
Epiphany.
child.
She seems like very mature, which is good.
Yeah. And like,
Good.
I love that like she works with her brother. I think that that's like,
nice.
that's so cool. And so like, but I feel like teenagers sometimes have this pressure, and women have this pressure even in our 20s and in our 30s to somehow come out fully formed like that, where all of a sudden,
Right.
like whatever you put out at 16 is like you, and it has
That's
to be
fucking
great and it has to be
scary.
amazing. And like, yeah, and I think that that is, it puts unreasonable expectations on people, because even listening to the progression of her stuff from when she was 14 to 17, right? Yeah.
And
Oh my God. Yeah, working with teenagers, I didn't realize what a baby she was until like
wow.
she had popped up on my Spotify and I really liked her.
She's very talented.
She's so talented.
She produces all her own stuff, right?
Yeah, she and her brother. Phineas
So
is like
cool.
in his 20s, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love that they're a brother-sister duo.
Yeah, it works.
And like it totally works. And like I started researching more about her because like one of the kids that I work with who's 11 really likes her.
cool.
And so I was like, oh my gosh, like I'll check her out more. And like I appreciate her artistry, but I also can see the progression even in her work, even at such a young age.
That's awesome.
And it's so cool to see that like she is putting out stuff, but you can see the evolution. And I think that that gives people more realistic expectations because like the very first thing you do doesn't have to be great. Even like the 10th thing you do doesn't have to be great.
That's true. That's what I admire about Bjork, because like in her 50s, she has reignited a career that was already successful and turned it into this whole like multimedia, like multidisciplinary, like coming from like DIY punk ass roots. I'm like, wow, that is, if anything for me were to be career goals, I'm like, that is like the most beautiful trajectory.
Oh my God. I pretty much.
And like it gives me chills whenever I think about it, and just like
Yes.
her in general. I'm like, goddess incarnate. Like
thinking about her and thinking about like, I mean, when you told me that I was like a millennial Enya, that
you
was like the
totally
nicest
are.
compliment.
Yeah, because your music is so like ethereal, but it's so contemporary.
Yeah, and that's how I feel about her career, where it's like she is really intent on what she does. Like Enya doesn't try to sound like other people.
Yeah.
She just sounds like Enya.
She really does.
And I admire that so much. And I admire also that like she is like an older female artist. Same with Kate Bush, where it's like
Yeah, they all have very singular styles.
yeah, and they stuck with their style and they stayed true to themselves. And like they obviously they let it evolve, but like I admire that. I'm like, yeah, I want to live in a castle based on my ethereal music.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Living in a castle.
I'm just like, that's right. Ethereal music can build castles.
I believe that. That's the world that I'd like to live in.
That's that's the world that I'm
That's your world.
avidly constructing.
Yes. Oh my God, it's a beautiful world. Obsessed. I can't wait to see all of your like next videos and stuff.
Oh my God. I'm so excited to like release more stuff. And like this year I've really been
You've been killing it.
I've been leaning into just leaning in.
Leaning in.
I
Perfect.
keep feeling like
Blossoming.
yes. It's kind of like you're like, oh, I'm gonna throw myself at the ground so that I'll fly. It's a lot of that.
Yeah. Word. Same. I use the expression fire under my ass a lot.
There you go.
Yeah.
I keep like tripping and falling into success because
Yeah.
I'm like willing to run into things.
Exactly. It's like you always have to risk failure and like kind of be okay with it.
Yeah. And I think that's really important in like, I guess in regards to anything. Cause like some people have considered it like a failure if they don't, for instance, like support themselves financially with their art, that then their art has failed.
But that's not true at all.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, I definitely get that. But I mean, it's a lot to ask for like a DIY artist or somebody who's just starting.
Exactly.
Because I think even like you know, more like famous and successful artists, like they're not that rich.
Right.
They're just famous, but they're not that rich.
Well, and also like defining kind of like what is wealth. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, are you making stuff that you actually, it kind of goes
That's
back
true.
to
It's
what you're
very
talking
like
about. Like,
reductive.
yeah, like when you're talking about like, well, are you living your passions? Are you living your intentions? Are you activating
True.
your goals or are you not?
Exactly.
So, oh my God. I'm like, I want to talk to you for like 5 more hours.
I know. I think it's like on terms of like goal setting. I mean, like I bought a Tesla this year, and that was like
yes,
my like 5-year goal like 5 years ago, and it finally happened. It's so that's something that gives me hope for like the future. I can do it.
You can do
and
it.
you can like everyone can do it.
And I think
It's like the amount of like emotional energy that you invest into something is what really makes it happen. But you need to be clear about it, is what I've learned. It's like clarity is important.
And it sounds like really kind of like experimenting to get that clarity.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like with the esthetician stuff, you did get clear on the fact that like it sounds like helping people is valuable to you.
Of course.
And you're like, oh, what's a way that I can do this that really meshes with who I am? And then the same with like choosing which mode of artistic expression you're going with, that you're like, oh, well, which feels like me right now.
Absolutely.
So this has been an absolute pleasure.
Oh my God, time flies when you're having fun.
Right? I was just like, oh my gosh, that's crazy.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to link to all of your work and people can see you and people are going to be able to see all the castles and all the films.
All the castles. Yeah. Queen of the castle.
You're the queen of the castle.
In the Borat voice. Queen of the castle. My wife.
That's the perfect ending.
Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Why Not Both. If you would like to learn more about our guests, such as the one I interviewed today and all of the other people from this past season, you can head over to our website, which is wnbpodcast.com. Please make sure to like and subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss any interviews. And if you fancy, leave us a review. Thank you again, and I look forward to chatting with you next week.